Hey everybody, it's me, myself, I, the guy. You know who I am, some. I wanted to touch base with all of you. We've got an election coming up, and I know, I haven't seen that much of it right now, but I know there's going to be a lot of feelings, and a lot of thoughts, and a lot of potential barbs coming forward for this election cycle. And although I'm not delusional, and I think this is probably only going to reach a handful of people, I just wanted to put my voice out there on the matter and give you some thoughts. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're in luck. I will be chapterizing all of the sections of this video so you can jump between wherever you want to see wherever your interest is, whatever subject I happen to touch on. If you want to be able to skip ahead, if you feel like you've got the general idea of what I'm getting at in a certain section, you can jump ahead to the next section. If you're watching, I'm also going to upload this on Facebook. If you're watching this on Facebook, you might want to go to the YouTube video just to have the convenience of being able to jump ahead between different chapters that will be clearly labeled. During these election cycles, a lot of the time what I end up seeing is people will get really harsh in their comment sections on social media. And most of the time I feel like they're talking to their friends and family. Which, by the way, if you're on social media and you have a bunch of connections to people that aren't friends and family, this doesn't apply to you. Because, like, if you're talking to some guy if you're talking to somebody who you're not really even connected to at all, and then they have intense opinions towards you about politics, I guess you can handle that however you wish. I personally would just delete their comment and then not waste time on them, because if you're not even connected to this person, why even give them time? It's just time wasting at that point. But most of the time I feel like when you're having an interaction in social media, excluding Twitter, you're going to be interacting with people that are close to you, and you're going to be interacting often with friends and family. In light of this, I would try and compel all of you who are interacting with your friends and family this year to not be too harsh, to not jump down people's throats, to not draw lines in sand, to not be ready to tear people's heads off, to not make declarations of, oh, I'm going to walk away from the friendship, I'll delete you, I'm going to leave you from my life, all these things. Because I just want to really bring home the message that your friends and family are more important than politics. Your friends and family are more important than politics. Now, is this always going to be the case? No. No, there are certain issues in which I believe that politics becomes more important than friends and family. Let's say, if I was trying to organize a workers' strike, a general workers' strike across the country, and I ruffle some feathers in my friends and family, well, I'm probably going to be fine with that, because I think that it's an important enough issue where I just say, oh well, who cares? But I'd say that the vast majority of the time, especially in the political climate that we have, friends and family are more important. Mind you, it's quite easy to be able to communicate dissent among friends and family without it needing to be a federal indictment, without it needing to be this intense line drawn in the sand, without it needing to be met with ultimatums, without it needing to be this intensely dramatic showdown. It doesn't have to be any of that. You can just say, well, these are my feelings. I feel like blah, 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 blah. This is why I'm coming from this perspective. If the other person chooses to be crazy, you can always go, hey, I would like to continue this conversation with you, but I care more about our relationship than I do about this conversation. So we can just shelf it, because I don't want to continue pushing anything further that's going to make it to where this conversation leads to us being less connected. That's at least how I plan on going about all of this. If anybody wants to talk about politics, I will start to state my opinion, and the moment that I see emotion or stress or anything coming out of them, I'm going to say, hey, fuck all this. You're more important. You are more important. and I'm not going to worry about it. And I think this is going to be a tough sale for a lot of people, because I think a lot of people are very thoroughly in the ideology that if you do not agree with them on politics, you are not respectable. I have people that I know that I'm close with that they basically believe that if you do not agree with them on politics, you're not respectable. And that's not something that I think should... If it's situations in which the politics are just crucial, they're critical to whether or not we are going to survive as a country, then I can understand it. But stuff like choosing between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, I don't believe that that is critical to the survival of our nation. I don't think it is, and I don't think at that point you should be overriding what is a very fundamental part of friendship and connection with family, love, which is, if you genuinely love someone, you have to demonstrate some level of respect and trust in their perspective. You have to say, part of what you're doing when you love them is saying that their journey matters, their perspective matters, their spirit matters, everything that they use to be able to weigh all of life's interactions and exchanges matters. And so, even if you didn't come to the same conclusion as them, you have to have a certain level of appreciation and respect for, this is what they came to. Through all of their wisdom, through their life's journey, through their experiences, this is what they came to. And I respect them, and I respect their agency, I respect their reasoning enough to where I'm going to give them love and appreciation for why they would come to such a conclusion. And then from there, you just have a conversation with them. And I don't want to be like this, bleeding liberal fairy where I can't have conversations where you disagree. You know how much your friends and family can endure in conversation, as far as ball busting, as far as teasing, as far as giving them shit, as far as messing with them. You know how much that is. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things, provided you're not crossing the line of what's too harsh for them, what's too being critical of them. What's the point where you're starting to communicate such harsh criticism that you're basically communicating that they're beneath you in being able to reason, in being able to discern reality, that you look at them as beneath you? Because there is a point in which you're communicating, you're valuing politics over friends and family, that you're doing that. You're communicating that these people are beneath you. And all for politicians who, they don't care about you. I would say there's about, if I were going through all the politicians that I know of, 5 to 10 of them that I think actually care about the people really deeply, and I could see potentially having some friction with other people about. Most politicians don't care about you. They are more than willing. I mean, look at the insider trading that happens in Congress. They're more than willing to cheat the rest of America to serve themselves. That's what we know. They will sell you up the river if they have a good deal. So you treating them like there's somebody to be protected, and even fight your own family over, your own friends and family, is insane. Respectfully. Because I don't want to label you as insane. I don't want you walking away from this with any animosity towards me. That's the complete opposite of what I'm trying to do here. I'm just giving my opinion. I feel like it's crazy. But I can relate. I've done that exact same thing. I can absolutely relate to, I get bent out of shape because I feel really passionately about my beliefs, so I say, bruh, you, some harsh stuff, whatever I said to these people. And, so I get it. I get why you would do that. And, but I don't think it's the right answer. I think ultimately, unless it's something where either the politics is so important that you got to be like, no, you're going to have to eat this harshness that I'm giving you because these issues are too important to just stand idly by on. Or, which, if you believe that, I think that's what you should lead with. Like, then people will understand your fire a little bit more. Speak about the exact issue. If you're like, climate change is super serious, Donald Trump isn't going to suggest this, we're going to be dead in the next 4 years. If you believe that really, start with that. And then people will be like, okay, he believes we're going to be dead in the next 4 years, so that's the reason why he's as intense as he is. Then I can't blame him. But if you're just like belittling a person because of their lack of understanding in a situation, you're just, shitting on them. Like, they're not going to respond to that. They're not even going to understand why it's happening. And you're not going to understand why they reach their perspective. And it's just going to be a mess of divisiveness. And that benefits all of your enemies. Divide and conquer that you're playing right into their hands when you decide to look for reasons why you can't get along with your neighbor. And it's not good strategy. So on a selfish level, it's not good strategy. But at the end of the day, don't you want to have friends and family that will, they're not going to sell you up the river. In fact, they are going to do that. You call one of your friends, doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, they're Republican, vice versa. You call them right now and say, I'm in a bind. They're probably going to help you. They are probably going to, if they can, they're going to see how they can help you. They really will look out for you. They're people you can count on. And any level of sacrifice you're willing to do for that is not something you should be doing. It really isn't. Because you don't, not to just go with like, don't look a gift horse in the mouth, but you don't get to choose who is going to be your best friend. If you want to just go through like all the people that politically agree with you and be like, I am going to choose these people, that's fine, you can do that. You have no guarantee that those people are actually going to be the ones that will, through thick and thin, be by your side. You don't know how that's going to look. Those people could just as easily, fair weather, be like, well, this isn't looking good for me. You don't know. You don't know yet. And to have somebody who could potentially stand by your side through everything, but for the fact that they're Republican, they're Democrat, you damn them, you condemn them in any fashion. I just feel like I really want to voice caution with that. You don't want to do that. Be careful about it. Now, like I said, I feel like there's two instances in which you could greet somebody with some harshness. It could be, one, because the politics are so important. The second is, if the reasoning from your friend is so off-putting that you feel like, okay, this is going to affect their morality as a friend going forward. And this, I think, instance needs to be quite egregious. You can't just be like, well, he's picking Trump, and Trump's bad, so, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. I'll give you an example of what's good enough. Your friend is a lobbyist for an arms manufacturer. You ask him, why are you voting for candidate A, candidate B? They say, because they're more likely to go to war, and I can profit off the death of children, and they smile at you. Then you go, yeah, I don't know about that, dude. That's probably not okay. You should be more ethical. Don't be like that. That's terrifying. My opinion. That's how I guess if you want to be friends with, child murderers who profit off of that, I'm not going to necessarily crucify you. But I would personally throw my hands up and say, hey, that's something I gotta, chew you out for. Because what the hell are you doing? The vast majority of instances in which somebody explains their reasoning for choosing candidate A or candidate B, good enough. For me, at least. I mean, I like to think that I'm a reasonably intelligent person. I don't think that I'm dumb. Let's just say that. I don't think I'm a dumb person. And I can see the justifications for both candidate A and candidate B. So, at that point, you know, most of the time when I hear rationalizations, it's like, oh yeah, I can see that. So the other thing I'll say is that I don't think either candidate's presidency is going to make that much of a difference. This is probably going to be another hot take for a lot of you, because a lot of you are really worried about stuff like Project 2025. It's been waved around as a pretty strong boogeyman. I personally think it's all hype. I don't think that you could shut down all those government offices, end pornography, end the separation of church and state, all that stuff. I think that idea of going forward with all that includes massive amounts of red tape. That's going to be immediately met by the courts, and it's going to be challenged for its constitutionality. I don't think you go forward with any of that lightly. I don't think you accomplish that in 4 years. That's just my thoughts. I think that would be immediately turned over. I just don't see it. I don't see that being able to be done without, because those are thoroughly divisive ideas that they would be trying to push forward. And I don't think that most divisive ideas grow wings and have success. I think it's like Supreme Court decisions where you'll see that sort of thing. But as far as like bills that go forward or executive orders that have lasting effect, I don't see that as being that common. I just don't. I don't know. Maybe somebody could educate me on that. But it seems like generally the constitutionality of being able to argue against things that were specifically enumerated in the Constitution, like separation of church and state, just doesn't seem likely. I guess maybe, and that's the other things people worry about, Supreme Court justices and the interpretation of Supreme Court justices. But I just feel like that's been holding us hostage for years. I'm unwilling to abide by that. I also feel like a lot of Supreme Court justices beyond Scalia and Clarence Thomas, and all the ones that people usually cite as being corrupt, I feel like they're all corrupt. I don't like the way that I've paid attention to decisions that have been made. And I believe there was it Fernando versus Gonzalez, where they were saying that a police doesn't need a warrant as long as one person in the house says it's okay for you to come in, even if it's not the owner of the house. Little things where they're basically trying to contradict the very expressly enumerated rules about amendments that were put forward explicitly by the intentions of the Founding Fathers. Little things like that. It's like, I just don't trust their intentions. I think it has more to do with they're going to operate for the benefit of the highest state, and whatever they want, whether or not that's to the benefit of the people or the detriment to the people. That's how I feel about most of how they've interpreted things. Whether or not that ends up being a Supreme Court justice picked by a Democratic candidate or a Republican candidate. So I'm not enthusiastic about that. And once you get past that, I mean, I don't know. I look at Kamala Harris's campaign as largely mimicking Trump's campaign at this point. I believe she's talking about continuing building Trump's wall, that she's running on that right now. I couldn't possibly. I already felt like between Trump's term and Biden's term, there wasn't really that much difference. There was more inflation under Biden's term. I'm assuming that probably would have happened under either president because of COVID and some of the policies put forward during COVID, which it seemed like Trump was supporting, on his way up to losing that election. I don't think that it would have went that much differently either way. You could say that, I'm not sure what you would point at. Ukraine, I guess you would say things would have happened differently in Ukraine. I think that's a lot of speculation. I think looking at Trump with J.D. Vance, who is connected to Palantir Palantir, which is Peter Thiel, these tech titans have a lot of interest in Ukraine to just blindly believe that because Trump has said certain things about how he wouldn't support, the conflict in Ukraine, doesn't matter. He's flip-flopped many times on different issues because of money funneling into his campaign. You can't trust that he would go one way or the other. Respectfully, if you feel, you have more faith in these people, I'm not going to. I'd much rather care about my friends and family than any of this stuff. I'm just speaking from my vantage point, what it seems like. But yeah, I feel like the last time that we've encountered something that wasn't a Supreme Court decision or a court decision that was highly divisive that ended up having success was the war in Iraq. I feel like military conflicts are what you're likely to see past that. Also speaking to Project 2025, and they specifically say we're going to end pornography. I just want to remind all you folks that the porn industry is not something that needs your protection. It is a titan. It's giant. It's gargantuan. Those are some big titties swinging around. You don't gotta go out there with your sword and shield and say, "Oh, don't you come for my porn." It's not a thing. They're already more than well equipped to flood lobbyists with lots and lots of money to be able to make sure that doesn't happen. I don't see porn going away as long as internet exists, porn's not going anywhere. So, I don't know. That's not something we have to worry about. Not something that I'm particularly interested in protecting either way. But even if I was, just off freedom, you should be able to do this. I don't think they need my help. Just my opinion, I don't think I need to do anything. Speaking of different boogeymen that I feel like I've encountered within this election cycle that have been brought forward, there's a video of Trump talking about something, and it has been interpreted as him saying that he intends either to end elections to make it to where he just becomes like the de facto king and there's no more election cycles and he just reigns supreme, or that he would make it to where he could do multiple terms and he wouldn't be just doing 2 terms, that he would continue seeking office forever, that he would just change the entire way through his presidency, the entire way that presidents are able to be elected and how many terms they're able to serve and whether or not there is even election cycles at all. And that's one, I don't think that's what he was trying to say in that video. I watched the video back. What I got out of it is that he was implying that, because he says something to the effect of, we need you all to come out in droves. After this election, we won't need you to do that. We're going to fix all that. Something like that, then he ended up saying. And I took that to be a reference to his perception of electoral manipulation, the whatever fraud he might believe is happening within election cycles, which is another subject in itself, and I don't really want to get into that here. But I think he was saying we're going to fix the election vulnerabilities. That's what I got out of it. I didn't get out of it because he didn't expressly say anything there. But I assumed he was referring to his perception of election vulnerabilities that he is claiming that he'll fix, which I don't believe he's going to fix at all, by the way. I don't think that's going to happen. Because he could have done it earlier if he believed in it at all, and he didn't, and, I just don't, anyway, I don't trust claims of politicians easily, so, but I do think that's what he was referring to. But I will say this, that if he does, I would like to see a clear statement made for me to believe this sort of a claim, because it's such a strong claim. I would need to see the exact phrase come out of his mouth. I'm planning on changing the election system to where there will not be presidential elections anymore. I will remain president, leader of this country. Or say, I'm going to change the system to where I can seek more than 2 terms. He needs to say something like that for me to get behind, assuming that that's what that message was supposed to be. And let me be clear, if he does say that, let me be clear. If he does say that, that will bring everybody together against him. Only die-hard Trump fans would stand for something like that. The majority of, all the people that have been on the fence politically, even lots of, I imagine, Trump supporters would say, that's a bridge too far. We're not doing that. Nobody's going to stand for that. We'd all protest against it. We'd all fight against it. That's not something that you have to worry about. It's not going to be a thing that we as Americans would put up with. I think he knows that, and that's why I don't think he would even begin to suggest something like that, because that would be such an unpopular thing. Nobody wants kings. We're not cool with the idea of kings in our society. Even if you like Trump, I don't think that that's something that you would abide by. But maybe you would, but I think that's a very small percentage of people that would be like, yeah, him forever. That's crazy. That sounds very strange to believe that that would be okay for people. So now we've come to the really exciting part, right? Right. I'm going to tell you who I'm voting for, me. I know you guys don't care. It's maybe a couple people are like mildly curious, but I imagine people are going to click on this part, so I just thought I'd make fun of that. I'm going to vote third party. Actually, I use the phrase voting third party, but if you want to know exactly who I'm voting for, it's my man, Vermin Supreme. Oh man, I love that guy. God, he's good. I'm going to point over here. Hopefully I'll have an image up. If I don't, I'll just be weirdly pointing over here for this section. See him? Guy with the boot on his head. That man is a genius. And he's actually legitimately like a hero to me. Because I look at people who do things that are really strange that nobody else is doing in society, and they just play that role to the nth extent. Especially like the element of comedy, using comedy to be able to traverse all of the nastiness of a world like politics. He's a national treasure. And really, we don't appreciate how great of a man Vermin Supreme is. He's awesome. And, I'd happily take his mandatory toothbrushing laws and his zombie-powered energy plans and all of those things. It just sounds magnificent. If I woke up tomorrow and Vermin Supreme woke up the next day after Election Day and Vermin Supreme did win the presidency, I'm not going to be like, oh my God, what have I done? My mandatory toothbrushing laws, we're all going to be in camps for needing our horses or ponies, rather. He is actually a real person who never sold out, and he's a great person. And and we're not going to have him forever. And it's like, I think it's easy to be a politician that says all the things that people want to hear. He's somebody who's an art piece in and of himself, who provides very meaningful commentary and does it all through this wonderful, creative, right-brained, hilarious character. And he's a genius. And I have to, at least one point in my life, vote for Vermin Supreme. I have to. And so that's what I'm doing this election cycle. If I wasn't, I would probably vote for Jill Stein. I've bounced between voting for the Libertarian candidate and the Green candidate. I generally agree more with the principles of the Green Party, but a lot of the time the Libertarian Party is more successful, and I just want to be able to support whatever is the most successful challenge to the two parties. But I also like the idea of the ideas that I actually do support having more success over time. So I'd probably vote for Jill Stein this time around, if not for Vermin Supreme. So now the question becomes, who would I vote for if I had no other choice between the two candidates? I know a lot of people are interested in stuff like that. Well, first, I wouldn't. If there was just two candidates, I would not vote for either, and then I would very loudly express my dissent and my distaste for both candidates and try and encourage everyone behind my banner of a rebel nation to challenge the government that would allow such a system. Doesn't that sound nice? Maybe I'll still do it. But yeah, I feel like if there was just the two choices and I did have a choice of not voting, I'm not voting. Maybe I'll vote for the down ticket. Maybe I'll vote for ballot initiatives. I'm not voting for those two candidates at that point. But let's say I had a gun to my head and I can't walk away without one or the other. Okay, you got me. Which one am I picking? Well, if I'm going purely off of my own sensibilities right now, I would pick Kamala Harris. And the reason is pretty simple. Kamala Harris, I feel like for most people, at least in my generation, I can't really sense the sensibilities of older generations that well. But I feel like in my generation and in the generations that hover around my generation, we look at Kamala Harris as just a run-of-the-mill politician. They're a politician. They're you know, kind of what you would expect from a politician. They're corrupt. But they don't have anything that stands out to them that makes people feel differently. And like I said to my buddy Javon, I don't think Kamala Harris is followed like a messiah or has this like cult following that people are just, some people would never dream of questioning Kamala. They look at her and they say, oh, well, yeah, I mean, she makes bad decisions, but I don't like the other guy. And also, I like the idea of a woman of color becoming president. That I feel like is the gist. I like some of the things that I'm still speaking from the perspective of somebody else who would vote for her. I like the things that she talks about, which I also, as somebody who's been through a lot of election cycles, if a politician says a bunch of liberal shit, I'm not going to necessarily believe that they're going to do any of it. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, when Joe Biden ran in 2020, he also promised a bunch of liberal shit, and it didn't happen. I don't believe just because you promise a bunch of stuff or that you talk about what your policy positions would be, that you're going to do any of it. So that gets, if you're not somebody that I believe is a person of integrity right from the get-go, then I don't think that that's what's going to happen. But anyway, I said that I'd pick her. I'd pick Kamala over Trump. So the question is, why? Why would you do that? And it's very simple. Like I said, Kamala is somebody that people just consider like the average politician. She's just within the world of politics. She exists there, and she operates the same as other politicians. And here's my problem, is that Trump does too. But when people think of Trump, when I encounter the public's perception of Trump, there's a very large group of people within the political world, within America, within our culture, that think he is a hero. They have like a very big hero complex around him, almost to the point of where it feels like he's like a messiah. He's a prophet that's come into play to challenge the system that is all of the governmental infrastructure that's been working for years, the deep state, if it will. All of these pieces that have long-standing Washington insider corruption, which exists. That's a real thing. But they believe that he is the one who's going to dismantle all of this. He's somebody for the people. He's going to stop it all from happening. It's going to be his presidency that goes against them. That's why they're so mad to take him out, which I want to speak on a little bit later. But he is a person who's going to change everything. And he's somebody for the people, and we have to get him in office, because if we don't, then we're just serving the elites, and the elites are going to be served by this politician, this run-of-the-mill politician. I could understand you believing that if we didn't already have a term of Trump. We had a term of Trump from 2016 to 2020. Again, don't want to be disrespectful, so I'm going to try and bring it back a little bit. We had a term with him. The term to me did not suggest anything about how he was different from other politicians. I didn't see any of that. I don't know what you guys... If you're perceiving that, I would like to have more of a discussion with you on why you feel that way. But from my perspective, that's not what's going on. You look at his presidency, his term, and you see his cabinet was full of people that were very deeply working for the governmental infrastructure, the corruption in Washington, the elites. They were all there. And he ran on draining the swamp. That's what he had said. And that didn't end up happening at all. There was no sign of that. I can't think of a single thing he did during his time in office that struck me as he was working against the deep state, that he was an agent of change for the people, not just doing what the elites, the Washington insiders, the people at the top would want. The corporate body. I just don't see it. I would need somebody to point me to specific instances. And so this is, to me, a much more dangerous figure, because this is somebody who is doing the exact same thing as politicians who we greet with skepticism. We look at politicians generally and we say, they're not going to follow through with their promises. They're dishonest. They don't serve us. They serve the elite. We see that and we clearly say, yeah, we should just generally not trust them. We see Trump and like half of American citizens say, I trust him. He's my hero. I love him. And they have this very big infatuation and this attachment to Trump. And so for me, it's more important, if I have to choose between the two, to rip that Band-Aid off. In my opinion, I want to just stand and say, yeah, I'm going to vote for the guy or the person in this election who doesn't have racist rhetoric, is what it boils down to. They both, to me, are going to be figures of corruption. They're going to act corruptly, and they're going to, their campaign is going to operate within the space of corruption and them being beholden to their funding and the people at the top of the system, the elites. And any perception of that being something else is just missing, I feel like, of the picture as far as it goes. I don't understand why. But one of them is in debates saying that Haitian immigrants eat dogs and cats, and that we need to be afraid for our dogs and cats because Haitian immigrants will eat your dogs. And that is way too close to like Jim Crow level tropes. Like, whether or not you want to think, oh, that's just xenophobia, he is dangerously close in talking like that to being racist. So that just sounding like clear racist dialogue, rhetoric to be saying. You're referring to countries that are third world largely because of our influence, that had to do what they had to do for survival in their country. And then you're trying to say that they would, in our free society where you could easily get a job, you can easily go to the grocery store, that they would eat people's pets. It's extraordinarily dehumanizing, and it's offensive rhetoric, and I take it as racism. And so you got a guy who's going to do all the same things as the average politician, but on top of that, he's also saying terrible things. And that's enough to me to say, yeah, I really don't like this. I don't like the further idolization of him. He's like one of those figures, like, I guess like a Ronald Reagan or maybe an Obama, that I think the further we allow him to be part of our culture, there is going to be like a more fervently attached, maybe even larger group of people that just want to be a part of him and or want him to be at the center of their political discussion and are just have an attachment to him as a leader. And it's like he is somehow somebody that has been able to convince a large group of people that he is what he claims to be, which is an agent for the people. And he's not. He is absolutely not. You can tell very clearly. He's talking about his cabinet positions now, and they're like the CEO of JP Morgan, the CEO of BlackRock. That's about as elite as you can get. You just don't... I don't see why you would take that as he is anything but an instrument for the elite. And then you got to say, well, how much do I appreciate him being racist against Haitians? You know? him having this extremely strange rhetoric, and I don't appreciate it. So that's, and this is actually a change for me, because I think back in 2016, I was much more outspoken about Hillary Clinton, because, you know, the main reason is I feel like she cheated Bernie Sanders out of the nomination. And I was really butthurt about that, because I ran for Bernie Sanders' campaign. He's one of that 10 list, the group of 10 people that I said I felt like, definitely at the time I felt this way, that he was somebody who really cares about the people and he's operating for the people. That's somebody like Bernie Sanders. And them completely sabotaging his nomination, I felt lots of resentment towards Hillary Clinton. And so then it was easy for me to see, this is somebody that very clearly the establishment favors, even though the establishment at the time would have been happy to take either, clearly, because it worked out for them either way. But they favor Hillary Clinton. So I said, I can't stand this woman. She messed up Bernie Sanders' campaign, and she's very clearly the choice of the elite. Fuck her, I don't like her. Now 2020 comes around, and I'm still feeling the resentment of the Democratic Party. And they still, in many ways, that they did not allow for debates to occur between the few candidates that were left. It was few and far between the debates that they allowed to happen. And they did just a bunch of underhanded tactics the same way that they did in 2016 to sabotage Bernie Sanders' run, who was the far more popular candidate, from having the nomination. And I, again, was off-put. I didn't spend anywhere near as much time trying to criticize Joe Biden online. But if you had put a gun to my head back then, I would have said, yeah, I'd rather go for Donald Trump, because I don't like that the Democratic Party destroys all of the voices within it that are the voices that it should be. And I was just generally upset about that. But now that I've had time to be able to remove myself from the emotion of the equation and me trying to do things basically to undermine these parties wholesale based on my feelings, I think it's more important for people to criticize the candidate that has more charisma, who's just as evil. I think that's a huge thing in our society, is that when somebody has a substantial amount of charisma and they start having success in the public field, but you can see this person is just as evil as any of the other people. In fact, potentially more, because of the ideas that they espouse and the rhetoric that they're using. You should say, hey, that guy is more of the problem. You should focus more of your energy on saying, this guy is a clown. And I'm happy to spend energy also on Kamala Harris and saying she's a run-of-the-mill politician. You know, all of the criticisms back at home, she's not very good at public speaking. Whatever it is that you want to make a criticism about her for, I'm fine with doing that. But I think starting at Trump makes more sense, because he's a cultural phenomenon. People really like him, and they shouldn't. I mean, like I said, this video started at, you should respect your friends and family. You should love your friends and family. So if somebody takes offense to this, I'm sorry. And, you know, it's just my opinion at the end of the day. And if you come forward and you give your reasons, and I'd actually like to give what reasons I suspect those people are voting for those people, for either side, then I'd be happy to hear it. And I don't want to just speak over people's ideologies, and I'm open to being wrong. But outside looking in, I just don't think that he deserves to have as much power as he has in our society. He's really starting to have a foothold, and he's, to me, just as much of a corrupt figure as the rest of them. And so when a corrupt figure actually ends up getting currency in our society, I start to worry about it. Okay, but here's another counterpoint to everything I just said. I just got done saying if I had to choose between the two, I would pick Harris. But here's another thought. If we pick Trump, then we're done with him. He only gets those 4 years unless he tries to do the weird take a bunch of extra terms. We're not going to put up with that. He's only got 4 years left either way. So why not get it out of the way, Do you really want to see another election cycle after this with his face in it, with him being the center of the dialogue, where he's, having 5 different assassination attempts made on his life? I'm not interested in that. I want him to be gone. I don't like him being a cultural phenomenon anymore. Just, if he has to be president to be gone from our public discourse, then he can have those 4 years. I'm not even mad at it. I don't care. But, that would be my reasoning as to why. And I'm tempted to just say, yeah, I'd pick that side. But like I said, I'm picking third party. I'm picking Vermin Supreme. So I wouldn't do either of them. But on some level, I just want that to not be there at all. Because it's old. I'm tired of it. At least my feelings. Obviously, again, I don't want to offend the people that I care about. Friends and family that value Trump. It's something that I would like to have a discussion on. But those are my feelings, and I don't mean to offend any of you. So those are my feelings on that. So these are some of my other feelings. So I said I would speak to why I think people would want Trump, and I'm going to speak to that a little bit. My reasoning is they look at figures like Joe Biden, like Hillary Clinton, and like Kamala Harris as figures that are completely representational of the establishment machine, of the deep state, of the inner infrastructure of the governmental leadership that's been running the government for a long time. Figures like the Council on Foreign Relations, the people that are more likely to be represented all the time as constant figureheads, the Washington insiders. And to me that makes sense because she is very clearly more of that representation. She had her policies written basically by the heads of the largest banks. She's getting support from Dick Cheney. I believe there was somebody just recently that was another person who was also a big figure within the conservative movement. And it's like there's a lot of the people that I think are within the establishment on the conservative side that are coming over and showing support to Kamala Harris because she exists in that world and she's for those people. And, if you're an independent voter, you don't look at Kamala and say, well, she's going to do any of what most people consider progressive. If you believe that she's going to do the stuff like lower the cost of food and then do the $25,000 credit for housing if you're a first-time home buyer, then I could see, that being an appeal. But I feel like most people are going to say, yeah, sounds nice when we see it, which we wouldn't. A lot of people I don't think would expect that they're going to see that. So then you're in a situation where you say, okay, what is it that she's going to do that would be worth any sort of difference? And, she's just as much going to want to participate in any conflict. She's saber-rattling to nearly the extent as Trump in Iran. She seems like she's interested in the continuation of Ukraine. She definitely supports Israel in their genocide of Gaza, of Palestinians. What's sticking out in this scenario? Maybe her positions on abortion, but I still feel like what Trump did in relation to abortions is not really that impactful in relation to, because he wasn't even president when Roe v. Wade was overturned. That happened during Biden's presidency, and I don't think it was Trump justices that caused that to happen exclusively. I feel like if it was an exclusively, because I believe he appointed 2 justices. Was it 2 or was it just 1? So it wouldn't make sense for it to be that him receive the blame of that. So it's like, I don't know exactly why people would be stuck on we need to be able to have somebody different than Trump. If they're just feeling like, well, Kamala is the establishment candidate. And I gave you my reasons, the racist rhetoric. And, but let's say that, you know, this independent candidate or this independent voter sees Trump and they say, yeah, but she's completely establishment. I think his rhetoric is mostly coming from a place of good faith, and he's not actually trying to character assassinate people that are immigrants if they're doing the right thing. They just want to be more vigilant against the wrongdoing. And, you know, within that framework, I can see it. I can understand why somebody would say, yeah, I like Trump more because of these things. And then on the flip side, and of, you know, abortion, of course, if you're somebody who's very strongly pro-life, he seems like within his rhetoric and within the Republican platform in general, that they're more strongly pro-life. So it might just be a matter of, I'm going to vote this way because I don't want abortions to happen. And that would make sense to me. That would make perfect sense to me as far as that goes. Some people, it's because they just don't want to have more taxes, which that might be a conversation that I would want to have with them as to it being that big of a deal that they would get taxed. But then if they were, you know, very insistent on, well, the government isn't doing it, they're misappropriating funds and that sort of a thing, then I could understand it a little bit more. But I do feel like at that point, that needs to be part of the dialogue. They need to be saying, hey, I want to be able to have control of how the discretion, where my tax dollars go. And as opposed to just being like, taxes forever is bad. If you make enough money, then, you know, you shouldn't be trying to potentially fight against this. But maybe you're ideologically opposed to there being any government spending. Maybe you just look at things vastly different, and there are a lot of different ways of approaching how you can believe government should work. You could be more libertarian, you could be more anarcho, and I've heard interpretations of those belief structures that have made sense to me. So there are instances in which I can respect that perspective. From the other side of it, if you're voting for Kamala and you look at somebody like Trump who has very xenophobic, transphobic, homophobic, very coarse presentation in general, I can see that. One, right off the bat, I mean, you don't really have to get into the politics if you just don't like the person's personality. And if you don't like what they're standing for, which is, you know, vilifying people that are immigrants or you know, all these different figures in our country based on identity politics, that's something I could see just immediately that being a deal breaker. And you wanting to stand abjectly against it, I can understand that. He has anti-worker rhetoric. I believe he said recently something about not supporting workers getting overtime. That to me is crazy, and I don't like that he's anti-worker. That's one of the reasons personally why I would never vote for Trump. And if you believe very strongly in the effects of climate change, then you definitely would want to be in lockstep with the Democratic Party at that point, unless you feel like they're not doing enough, and then you want to vote for somebody like Jill Stein, the Green Party. That would make sense. But if you're particularly concerned of Trump's impact versus Harris's impact in relation to climate change, I could see that. I think there's reasonable enough instances in which you can see why people are reaching their particular interpretation of politics. And I just want to speak to that a little bit before we go forward. So let's get to why do I think that the assassination attempt happened with Trump. And I don't want to get too far into the conspiracy world, because if you gave me enough rope, I would hang myself. I would definitely talk about it to that extent of my own suspicions. But let me just say it as I think that Trump does have enemies within the political sphere that he exists in. But I think that those enemies work for the same people. And let me put it to you like this. Imagine that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party and the Trump party, whatever you want to say, the Trump culture, they're all competing cartels. They're all getting it from the same, whatever product they're selling, politics, whatever you want to use for this analogy. They're all getting it from the same supplier. There's somebody above them who's giving them the power to have this through the cartel. They're getting it from the same supplier, and it's coming from the same source. So they're doing the bidding and the work of the same people that are above them in the hierarchy. But they might kill each other. You see stuff like this in the Philippines, where no matter where the funding is coming for these leadership, they target, it's normal in the Philippines for presidential candidates and candidates for office. Well, I don't know if it's president over there, it might be prime minister, but candidates for office will try and kill each other. This is something that we've already seen play out. And even though they might operate for the exact same interests, if they are planning on doing something that could potentially get one, just imagine that if Trump gets into office, he wants to get just a handful of people in trouble. Just a few people that are doing wrong within the democratic or liberal infrastructure, the neoliberal sphere. And Nancy Pelosi, for example, for insider trading. Maybe he would want to do something like that. Not because he actually cares about this sort of thing, or he's operating in opposition to the deep state or the elitist infrastructure. It's because he wants to be able to take out his rivals. It's about something. It's a rivalry. It's his enemies that are operating in opposition to his success. That's the only thing. It doesn't have to do with him caring about the future of anything. And likewise, if Kamala gets into office, maybe, you saw there was an interview with Elon Musk, I believe, where he said, if Kamala gets elected, I'm screwed or something. There's people on the other side that if Kamala gets in there, he might target some of the Republican figures, not because they're standing for some greater good by doing so, but because when they do that, they'll be able to take out rivals for them that are occurring just because their own political positioning is making them become rivals, and that they rely on each other. And then they rely on each other, they rely on besmirching each other, and that besmirchment is making their stock either rise or fall, and so removing them might be valuable, and having consequences for them might be valuable. That's what I believe happened. I don't believe any lone gunman stuff. But I don't want to get too deep into that. I just think that, there's probably somebody who's involved with the Democratic establishment that doesn't want to be held accountable by Trump's presidency. But that doesn't mean that Trump doesn't work for the elites. He would be working precisely for the elites, for these figures. And that somebody within that opposing cartel just decided to take it upon themselves to remove him because they could be held culpable. But the people at the top, the elite elites, they're not being held accountable for anything. That's not how it's going to go. It's just people at the bottom. This is like minions fighting minions. That's how I look at it. And that's why I don't think that Trump having assassination attempts on his life automatically means that he's a man for the people and not a corrupt figure. No, he's definitely still a corrupt figure. He just has enemies within factions of the government. And so that factionalism can cause things like this to happen. I've heard a lot of people say this, but it's worth repeating, that the presidency is probably the most minimal important position as far as impact of all, beyond vice president, all of the positions that you can think of within our voting powers. It gets the most coverage because in our minds it's like the cultural king that stands on top of everything. But as far as, executive orders, yes, there is some significance in what an executive order can accomplish, but I actually think there is a decent amount of legal red tape that comes from court decisions that decide whether or not that's going to be substantiated or not. And I think that there's other aspects that make it to where executive orders are not as significant in power as to what we think. And I think that what's way more likely, if we were to order in the priorities of what is the most significant thing within our voting powers to be able to focus on, it's local government. Local government's number one, for sure, by a wide margin. You know, municipal, district, those sort of things are the things that are going to have the most significant impact on what goes on in your life and how things play out in your life. And after that, it's state government. It's state legislature. It's not the U.S. Congress. It's, you know, Michigan legislature, New Jersey legislature. It's a totally different group. It's governor. It's not president. And then if we go past that, so that's number 2, is state. We go to number 3, it's the United States Congress. It's the federal legislative body. It's not the president at that point either. And so then you got to get down to like 4 or technically 5 if we're going to talk about the judiciary after that. And he's not going to have as much power. But I kind of count that in the state and local. And then you could say Supreme Court justices. So yeah, then you would say put the president at the 5th level. And so, but this isn't actually me saying, oh, you should be going out there and paying attention to all these down ballot races, and you should be paying attention to your local races and state races. I am to an extent, but I also feel like because there is so few people doing that it largely also doesn't matter. And it should matter, but because so many of the candidates just end up being extensions of the arms of institutions that exist within wherever you happen to live within that municipal area, that you're just going to get somebody who represents a very slim interest of that institution, whatever that institution is that has success in your city, in your neighborhood, in whatever. And it's not going to be to the benefit of the people at all. It's just they operate for them. And then they're also very, like, because there's such a limited amount of people who even pay attention to politics, I feel like they run on virtually nothing. When I pay attention to, there was a campaign when I lived in Grand Rapids at one point. I voted for the campaign for mayor, and I voted against the candidate that ended up winning, Rosalind Bliss. And it's because when I looked at Rosalind Bliss's campaign, I couldn't really figure out what she wanted. I didn't know what she wanted beyond like very ambiguous claims. I couldn't find like a specific, this is a policy position. I want to see changes that will result from me doing this XYZ. You know, I didn't see any of that. She said something about having support for the existence of golf courses in Grand Rapids. That was the most significant blurb I could get out of her. And it wasn't a significant one. I thought, well, the mayor is supposed to be pretty important, and she didn't say anything important. She just looked like a pretty lady with a smile who was, I guess, virtue signaling about liberalness, but in a way that didn't mean anything. I didn't know what she stood for. It just seemed like a nebulous liberalness with a woman with a pretty smile. And that just didn't, just like, that doesn't do anything. That doesn't mean anything. And I'm certain that she came from some institution within either the legislative body or, you know, there were other people that ran recently within, I believe it was still Grand Rapids at the time, that I remember it was like firefighters, retired policemen. They're all part of some big institution within the city that's backing them. And that's who they're beholden to. And they're not going to have positions that go outside of being beholden to those institutions. And that's just the reality of it for the most part. You do, in some situations, you'll see somebody who runs for a local office who is very, like, they're not part of any sort of institution, and they're very opinionated, and they're just like a model citizen that wanted to participate. And those people are great. And like, that's the thing I think we really need, is more people that run for these local offices, that participate in these local offices, that maybe even run for a state office, because you're going to see a lot of the same thing in the state office. You're not going to see anything that's vastly significant between either Republican or Democratic candidates. They're just all sort of extensions of an institution that operate on the behalf of the institution, that don't espouse any ideologies, that have any sort of like heavy progressivism because they don't have to, because they're not pandering to any young audiences, because we don't pay attention to that. It's all a bunch of old people in the institutions within whatever area that they happen to be covering. They're not really doing that much to even win our votes because there's nobody paying attention to it. And they're already like worked in with the institutions, so they know what they need to do for those institutions, and that's about what they're focusing on, and that's it. So yeah, I feel like if we focus more on that, and then if we like made it very clear, like, hey, this person's running for my local office and they don't stand for anything. Let me try and interview this person. Why don't you stand for anything? Follow them on the street. Why don't you stand for anything? Follow the other guy. Why don't you stand for anything? Actually call these people out. That'd be great. And then people actually run for these offices. That would be great. And then I feel like we would start to see a lot of changes. But the president in of itself, I don't think that, unless you were they were very much a man of integrity. If it was somebody that got in there and they were like, I really want to make meaningful changes, I think they're just going to do all the things that a figure who was representational of the elite is already going to do. So you're not going to see any drastic changes taking place. It's going to be the same thing that you were already getting. And this is a lot of why I don't pay attention to politics anymore. I don't focus on politics that much because I've realized that it's all kind of, it's already a completed game. We focus on the things that the world in politics that doesn't really matter that much, that's already spoken for. We fight over candidates that are already very much spoken for and aren't going to cause significant change. The places in which it's most likely to cause significant change, we don't pay attention to at all. And my voice and voices that are unique, anything that's not a centralized narrative that is, just constructed for us to follow through our circulated media, doesn't get much airtime, doesn't have much success. My voice is going to be essentially meaningless like it is right now. But I know a couple friends and family will listen, so that's why I decided to do this. But yeah, I don't really care that much about politics. But I do care about friends and family. We're back to that. Friends and family, that's who I more than anything, until we can start to see a power shift in how politics is even determined amongst people, I think the more important thing is just making sure that all of the connections that you do have with people who do care about you are cherished and taken care of. And other than that, I'm going to vote for Vermin Supreme, the man with the boot on his head, and I feel good doing it. I personally think Trump is the more reprehensible of the two, but I think they're both reprehensible. And that's my thoughts. So thank you for tuning in. Until next time. I'm here to... How do people talk? I don't understand how people talk. I'm still trying to figure out how people talk. I want to be a part of the people talk thing. Where people just talk, they don't actually, do a thing. They don't rap, they don't paint. They're just talking. I'm trying to break into that. I want to see how people talk. If you could tell me how people talk, that'd be good. I'm trying to figure out how people talk. People talk.